Hold on one moment. Sorry about that. Making sure we get our technical details worked out now. So, a few notes to preface this presentation. Number one, this whole story has been an endless pit of information. The boxcars, had disappeared for decades, and there was very little about it on the internet. And now that it has returned and it belongs to us, there is no end to the information that you can find about this boxcar. So I will be taking a couple tangents. I promise you they're all very interesting. We're going to weave in and out of trains. I made sure to make this presentation a little more train forward, knowing our audience. Second, there's going to be some video in here. There's some really interesting film that we found in the process of this. A lot of, it's video that is on the internet that has like a couple dozen views. So for, I think a lot of people, this is the first time this has ever been seen. And then finally, I know absolutely no French at all. So my apologies for my pronunciation on things being horrible. There's a lot of French writing when it comes to this. I'm doing my best. So I thank you in advance. So with that, this is New Jersey's Merci Train boxcar. It is the newest item in the URHS collection. It is about 130 years old. This particular boxcar was built, this model of boxcar was built 1893 to 1895. I believe ours is built by 1895 because there's a structural member with a stamp in it that says 1895, making it 131 years old. It was built as a troop transport boxcar for the French National Railways in Lyon, France. It was primarily a World War I troop transport boxcar. They were called 40 and 8 boxcars because they were designed to hold 40 men or 8 horses. Whether or not they would actually do that reliably is a different story. But they were, thank you. They were really a key part of the experience of fighting in World War I. A lot of the men who shipped overseas were transported around in these, and you spent a lot of time in them. So between the very well-known horrors of World War I, traveling these boxcars was not a whole lot better. Oh, thank you. Somebody says if they're fluent in French, I very much appreciate it. So this boxcar has a very interesting story to it. I'm going to leave the story to that so we can go back in time and discuss how this boxcar came to be in New Jersey. This is what she's supposed to look like. This was when the boxcar arrived here to New Jersey on a trailer headed to the Armory in Trenton. So these boxcars were originally World War I boxcars, and they were decorated, and they were filled with gifts, and they were sent to the United States as a thank you from the French people. Why did France go through all the trouble to send an entire train's worth of freight cars filled with stuff to the United States? For that, we have to go back to 1947. This is the first of our few main characters. This is Drew Pearson. So Drew Pearson was a syndicated columnist. So for those of you, the younger crowd, he was a newspaper writer. Newspapers were how we used to get news. It's like the internet, but it's on paper. And he was syndicated, so he privately wrote a column that he sold to newspapers all over the country. He was a bit of a muckraking journalist. He was very controversial. They used to say that most of what he wrote was true, and he had to write something every day, so he would find a story whether they were true or not. He was a very interesting guy. He was very popular because his writing was very interesting. He was very unpopular in Washington, D.C., because he would write kind of whatever he felt like about anybody of any party. I do know that Truman didn't like him and didn't think he had an honest bone in his body. But he was a Quaker, and he was a generous man. So following World War II, Europe was in ruins in a lot of ways, and 2 years after World War II, there was also a huge famine, so Europe was looking at potential starvation. It was a very bad situation. If you're familiar with the Marshall Plan, which was the official plan for the United States to send aid to Europe. That didn't happen until later. But in the meantime, the United States was sending food, it was sending supplies, was sending whatever Europe needed, but not in a very loud way. It was out of necessity. So Drew Pearson, in his column, he had a national platform. He decided that he would basically dare the White House to do something drastic. So in this article, which he wrote on October 11th, 1947, he made the point that multiple countries were sending aid to Europe, but the Russians, and keep in mind we're in the early years of the Cold War, were doing it very loudly. The Russians wanted the people of Europe to see communism and see it as a force for good, and exert its influence over an ailing Europe when it was at its worst. So this was Drew Pearson's pitch. He said, why not dramatize the story of America's sacrifice by running a friendship train straight across the United States, straight through the heart of America, collecting food as it goes, inspiring the housewives and farmers of the nation to spare a bag of flour or a bushel of wheat and bring it down to the friendship train as their contribution towards friendship with the people of Europe. So this was purely his idea. He had a national platform, and he thought he would challenge the White House. There was the Citizens Food Committee, which had been collecting donations, and he wanted the United States to make donations to Europe that they would see, so that they understood specifically that it was American democracy and not Soviet communism that would save the day. He didn't quite get the answer he wanted from the White House, but he did get the answer he wanted from the Association of American Railroads. The AAR seemed to take a more leading role in kind of telling the railroads what to do at the time. So the AAR said, we would make this happen. And mind you, that was October 11th. He wrote that article. This front page is from November 4th. Over the course of 3 weeks, the AAR got on it, and they said, we're going to do this. We're going to coordinate the railroads. We're going to coordinate the freight cars, and we are going to make this train happen for you. And it became a true grassroots effort because Drew Pearson had this national platform. People saw his articles constantly, and the news jumped all over this. So there are news articles about this in every state all over the country. One of the things that worked really well for him, aside from having the railroad, so long as the AAR could kind of tell the railroads where they should be and what they had to do, they were going to make it happen. And over the course of these 3 weeks, they collected donations. They, not only the people, but the railroads collected donations. They decorated freight cars. They painted a couple passenger cars to be a part of this train. They had emissaries from France and Italy come to the United States. And then what really worked well for them, and again, this is some film, so if there's some latency in the video, I apologize, but you should at least get the idea. What worked really well for the friendship train is that it was going to leave from Sacramento, but a few of the film studios in Los Angeles said, we want to be a part of this. You should start it in Los Angeles. So they, instead of running straight across the country, they started in Los Angeles and ran north. And they put on this big to-do in Los Angeles. So as this train is going by, and this was originally a 15-minute film about the train, every one of these flat cars, whether they have bands or dignitaries on them, are from all of the major film studios that brought their lights and brought their their high status and popular culture, and really kicked this thing off in a big way, and brought in celebrities and got people really excited about this. So they started in Los Angeles and headed east. The train was mostly handled, from what I understand, by the Southern Pacific, the Union Pacific, the Chicago Northwestern, that took it to Chicago. And then from Chicago, the train split between the New York Central and the Pennsylvania Railroad. So one ran into New York on the New York Central, and then one ran theoretically to New Jersey via the Pennsylvania Railroad. The train originally had the goal, as you saw on that page, of $10,000 worth of donations, or 80 freight cars. By the time the train was over with, they had actually collected 240 physical train cars worth of donations. It had become so popular. By the time the goods actually left the United States, they had equated their donations between donations to the train, donations afterwards, and monetary donations to about 700 carloads of donations, bearing in mind that they were only trying to get 80, which was incredible. There are people who said at the time that this was one of the biggest grassroots fundraising drives that had ever occurred in the United States till that point, probably by a lot. For New Jersey's part, New Jersey collected 7 carloads, which, considering how small New Jersey is not bad. And especially because a lot of the donations came from the Midwest, where it was actually farmers bringing their stuff straight from the farm, and not just people collecting donations from the store and bringing it to the train. There's a couple of very fascinating photos from New York Harbor. I actually learned today while I was putting this presentation together that they didn't actually need to car float the cars across the river. They did this just for the photos. You'll notice they painted the car float to say Friendship Train. They did the same thing with the ship that I actually sent the goods over on. And at the end of this film, you can see that they made a huge to-do of this in New York. Not shown in this particular film. There was a massive parade in New York City. It is truly fascinating what a big deal the United States made out of this. And it is important to note that, again, Drew Pearson wrote this article on October 11th. The train left Los Angeles on November 7th, and by November 18th, the train of 700 carloads worth of donations was on its way to Europe. That was about 5 weeks. That is incredible, and they did it without the internet. I find that fascinating and heartening. All of the donations had a tag that they put on them. There was a lot of processing that had to happen here before they sent everything over. But every donation had a tag on it that said, "In this vast melting pot of America, there are many different races and many religious faiths. In the spirit of democratic and Christian goodwill, we Americans have worked to bring these products from our fields to your homes. We hope that we hope they will help until the day when your harvests become abundant and beautiful again." So they're very unsubtle about the spirit of democratic and Christian goodwill as compared to that of the Soviets. And as for the vast melting pot of America, I will leave the modern day parallels for you to consider. So, what did the French do? So the donations all went to France and Italy. Italy, from what I understand, sent some statues. I have not been able to actually connect the statues themselves to the Friendship Train, but there are 4 statues on the Roosevelt Memorial Bridge in Arlington that were designed in the 20s and then never built, and then eventually they were donated and cast in Italy and sent to the United States in the 50s. I believe that to be the case. At least that's what I've read. France, for their part, decided that they were going to send a train. If the United States is going to send us a train, we want to send one back to them. This letter here we found amongst our research into the Governor Driscoll's files in the state archives. This was November 17th, 1948, so almost exactly a year later. Drew Pearson told Governor Driscoll that, guess what? The French are sending a train. You're getting a boxcar. Be ready for it. So the idea came from, there was an organization called the French Railroad Veterans, or something like that. I don't know exactly how it translates from French. And they went out and decided that they were going to use this particular boxcar. These boxcars are called 40 and 8 boxcars. As I mentioned earlier, they are meant to hold either 40 men or 8 horses. Some people will tell you that they are not meant to hold 40 men. They can hold 40 men standing up, probably not sitting down. They were very difficult to ride in. They weren't really passenger cars. They were just freight cars that had some openings for air. As you can see, I mean, they would just ride wherever they would fit. So these guys are just riding on some freight cars. They had no bathrooms. They had no utilities. Pretty much no comforts of any kind. They were just vessels with which to move soldiers to the front line to survive or not. They became very indicative of the shared sacrifice of World War I, to the point where there was an organization called the 40 and 8, which I will get to shortly. But these trains traveled all over Europe. This photo here is from the URHS collection. This was donated to us. That, I believe, is slightly smaller than our boxcar. That one actually says 32 or 40 men or 8 horses. A very important note somebody pointed out to me, not at the same time. It was 40 men or 8 horses, not both. My assumption is they probably would not split the horse cars or share the horse cars and the soldier cars, but hard to say. This is also from our collection. These are, I believe they're, judging by the trucks, they are American built. but I'm not sure. Like I said, this is an endless pit of information. These photos are from the National Archives that give you a very good sense of just how tightly packed these men were in these boxcars. And it's funny, when you look at these photos, they all seem to be kind of happy to have their picture taken. Maybe that somebody's paying attention to them. But if you read anything written by the people who wrote in these, they were not pleasant. This is actually a version of that same car that has a kitchen in it, which is very, very Spartan. They also weren't interconnected, so I assume they could only really cook in a camp-type setting. And this one I found amongst those photos, I just found interesting. That's an American-built locomotive. That's a Baldwin. They call these Pershing-class locomotives. There were 1,500 of them. There's actually 2 of these left in the United States. There was one that never got sent over to France, and then there's one that does or did operate at Texas State Railroad. But it's funny, despite the fact that they have the hook couplers and the buffers, it still looks very distinctly American. So, after World War I in 1920, there was a group of veterans that got together, members of the American Legion, who started the 48, which was basically an honor society of the American Legion. They were intended to be the men in the American Legion who most served the American Legion. So their job was to promote the civic acts of the American Legion. You know, child welfare. They would run a lot of donation drives and do stuff to improve American life. And they were named after the 48 to sort of make light of the horrible experience of riding in these boxcars. Aside from the general trauma of World War I, it was just a horrendously unpleasant way to travel, but it was very memorable. So they kind of took that and made light of it. So if you've ever seen a parade float that looks like this, I know there was one for sale in New Jersey recently. The boxcar became their mascot, so they would build boxcars like this to carry around in parades, and eventually it seems that kind of became bastardized into trains in general, and then the logo right now is sort of just a train. But the boxcar is ultimately their symbol. That's the name of the organization. There is also a part of the 48 called the National Boxcar Association that exists to, among other civic duties, to keep the history of the boxcar alive, and they make donations to restore some of these boxcars across the country, and they were very generous, and they supported us as well in our restoration. So let's talk about the Merci Train. So if you look at these boxcars, they're very festive. If you've ever heard the term a camel is a horse designed by a committee, I do kind of feel that way about these boxcars, because they wanted to decorate them in a way that was representative of France. But how do you decorate a boxcar that represents everything all at once? It's not easy to do. So they tried. So there's the big banner that goes through the middle, the Train de la Reconnaissance Française, which is the actual name, which is the French Gratitude Train. We called it the Merci Train. It seems that was something that was sort of made up by the press, and it stuck. It's a lot easier and a lot more fun to say than the French Gratitude Train, or the Train of French Gratitude. I believe the official name was the Train of French Gratitude of the French. Oh, sorry, to the American people was the full name in the full logo. So there's that across the middle. All of the shields represented the 40 provinces of France, so 20 on one side, 20 on the other. In the top right, there's the seal of America, and at the bottom left, there was the logo for the train itself. And if and when you can see it in color, there's a blue, red, and white flower, which represents the flowers of World War I that grew in Flanders fields over the graves of World War I soldiers. The red being the red poppy, of course, which has been a symbol of World War I and of the American Legion. And then there's a gold plaque, which we will see later, that notes the boxcar as a gift of the people of France from the French National Railroads for help rendered to the country of France before and after World War II. So interestingly, which I found in the process, which I was very surprised about, is despite the fact that these boxcars were very old, they were still in service in France, and I didn't realize before they were sent here, they actually ran on their own wheels. So I found this great film here that shows the departure of the train itself in France, and it just looks spectacular. They were only ever together very briefly in the United States, so it's spectacular to see the whole train run side by side. And bear in mind, they did all this work in Over the course of about a year, they restored 49 boxcars inside and out and collected the donations to fill them. I will get to what was inside them a little later, but February 2nd, 1949, a ship called the Magellan arrives in New York Harbor. If you read all of the news about it, they will tell you that that ship arrived in New York, and no, it did not. It arrived in New Jersey, which is our little claim to fame. They arrived at Pier H in Weehawken. Pier H still exists. It is a condominium complex, but if you wanted to go stand where the Merci Train once was, you still can. The Pier H belonged to the Erie Railroad, so they got a lot of the glory at the outset of this. In their company magazine, they bragged that the cranes that once unloaded the munitions and goods for World War II, the ones that loaded the munitions for World War II, are now unloading these symbols of peace here in the United States. And they had these big floating cranes. So the one that you see here in frame is the New York car. They unloaded that immediately, and they put it on this barge, floated across the river, unloaded it, put it on a truck, all in the same morning, and then put it in a parade that day. The way they're able to handle the logistics of this whole thing is fascinating, because without computers and probably without a bunch of labor laws and other insurance and rules, they were able to do these things really fast. Within a day, they were able to unload the ship, get a boxcar over to New York. Let me make sure I think I may have, sorry if I put it out of order. Maybe I skipped it. There was a very big parade. They estimated there were 200,000 people that came out to see the boxcar roll down Broadway in New York City. So as the parade was happening in New York, overnight, the longshoremen, whose labor was all donated by the railroad, unloaded all these boxcars into a bunch of donated flat cars because they were not going to run on their own wheels in the United States. From what I understand, I think the original plan was to run this train in France, ship it overseas, and then run it on their own wheels here on generally the same path as the friendship train. That was never going to happen. I believe they all had air brakes, more or less, but they were very old. They did not have any of the safety equipment that they needed to run in the United States. Obviously, American trains are a lot bigger because you could take their trains and put them on top of our trains, and they're still small enough to make all the clearances. So that was not going to happen, but the AAR was pretty quick to donate everything that was needed to load up the boxcars and ship them all over the United States. This is not a great photo, but I included it anyway because I'm willing to pay a hefty price for the original of this photo. You can see there, kind of silhouetted, it was the GG1 that pulled the Merci Train through New Jersey. You'll see it in the film here, but I would love an original copy of that photo. So what they did was they split the train in three. There was a southern section that New Jersey's was on, and then there was a New England section, and then a western section that split elsewhere. So there's at least a dozen cars that ran New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Washington, D.C., and onward in West Virginia, and then onward down south. So New Jersey, in addition to being where the cars were unloaded, was also the first stop, and is seen here in this also wonderful film. They had a big ceremony on the platform, and not a whole lot of people. There was a lot of the public there, but not a whole lot of people were there because it was a Sunday in the middle of winter in Trenton, and I guess much like Trenton is now, there is nobody in that city on the weekend. So Drew Pearson was a little bit unhappy that the governor did not arrive. But you can see in here, these are all the stops, and again, it's hard to overstate what a big deal this was for people. I guess in an era where there was not a whole lot more entertainment to compete with your civic expressions of patriotism, people really showed up for these things. And again, to see the train full of them is spectacular. That, if you notice, there's another one of those little 40 and 8 train parade floats. But absolutely awesome stuff. It's amazing what film still exists of this. And it's all from very weird sources. So I found a bunch of film from British Pathé because they seem to have a large archive of stuff that wasn't destroyed or done away with. They were kind of a news aggregator back in the 50s. But all the original network news, who knows where all that is. So this was the ceremony that they had in Trenton. Like I mentioned, the governor did not show up because they had intended to do a much bigger ceremony, but it wasn't going to be the one on the platform. But that was the one, of course, that Drew Pearson was there for. but New Jersey's ceremony would happen a little bit later. This is where we meet another one of our main characters here, which is Leonard Dreyfus. He's the guy in the middle. The two gentlemen on the left are from the French government. The guy on the right is one of the two men whose name I forget, who was with the French railroad veterans who actually initiated the whole program. So they're really quick. They pulled the train up at the station. They had their ceremony. They set out the car, and then they sent the train on their way. Somewhere, I have not been able to figure out what train yard it was, but they pulled the car over to a train yard, loaded it onto a truck, and then brought it down to the armory. Yes, Dave, I assume that's you because I can only see your initials. Yes, David. That gentleman there is not Andre Picard. He's the one whose name I remember. I'll have to find it. I think I might have it in my notes as we go on here. Andre Picard, I believe, is on the western section of the drop-off train. So what I find very interesting about this from like a railroad and non-railroad perspective is that this was just a massive undertaking, required a whole lot of coordination with a whole lot of people. So the fact that they could arrange for, setting out a train car now is like not a particularly simple process. The fact that they could run a passenger/freight train, set up a bunch of ceremonies, set up a stage on a flat car, and set in and out cars several times throughout the course of one day, and still run on a schedule is amazing, and it gives you a real sense of how sharp the railroads were in this era. There's our man, Drew Pearson. Dreyfus is the one next to him. These are the same folks. I believe that's their wives standing to the left. So they, if you notice in the earlier photo, train ran with a GG1. There were two passenger cars. The rearmost passenger car, you may have noticed, was red, white, and blue and painted white. That was actually the observation car from the original American Freedom train. In 48, the train had just wrapped up, so the car was still painted red, white, and blue, and it was available, so they put that on the train. And then right behind that, there was a gondola, and they had set up this big stage in it with a microphone, railing, and everything. And it had a hole cut in the side so they could walk right from that train car into the freight car and do their ceremony right on the platform. I have not seen a close-up photo of it. I would love to know which car it was. I believe there was a year or two prior, there was a big railfan trip on the Erie, and they had a gondola just like that had a hole cut in it so that all the railfans could stand out in the back, and they crammed 100 railfans in there. I would love to know if it's the same one, because I would not be surprised if it was around the same era. So this is our second main character here. This is Leonard Dreyfus. So officially, the governors were really in charge of the Merci Train ceremonies, and of course, as they would hand off the task to somebody important. He handed it off to Leonard Dreyfus. Dreyfus died many, many years ago, but he was very involved in a lot of institutions you would be familiar with if you're from New Jersey. He was an advertising man. He sold billboards, so like the advertising itself and the billboards themselves they would manufacture. He seemed to have made a ton of money doing it. He seemed to have been very well liked. And he was very generous. He donated to just about every college and university in New Jersey, donated to the Newark Museum, the State Museum. If you go to the planetarium at the State Museum, or at the Newark Museum of Art, the planetarium has him and his wife's names on it. And I was able to find a lot of this stuff because when he died, he left all of his personal records, which otherwise probably would not have been saved, to Seton Hall University, which is where I went. So we got to find all of these records. It's where I found this photo of him and all of his correspondence that really helped paint the picture of how this played out. Now, you may think in a presentation about trains that the logistics of a patriotic ceremony is probably pretty boring. It is not. It's actually kind of funny. I did not expect to find much in these letters, but I was really amused to find out what an ordeal this whole thing was. So it is obviously, this is a very good thing. We're all very glad it happened, but it was kind of forced upon everybody, and they kind of had to like it, which I find very funny. Obviously, it was a great thing to have happened, but it was a huge amount of work. So Governor Driscoll hands this off to Leonard Dreyfus. Based on their writings, I assume they were friends outside of having these professional tasks. Dreyfus took on a couple unpaid roles in the government. He was the head of the Civil Defense Commission during the war, and then the civilian version of that afterwards, which he did not get paid for. He was involved with the Friendship Train. on some sort of food donation committee, generally speaking, which he also did not get paid for. And then Driscoll handed him this as well. So you go through all his records with the governor and the letters back and forth. There's a ton of work, and he had a ton of questions, and there were a ton of decisions to be made, and Driscoll just wouldn't answer his letters. So the one here I find especially funny because he had sent a letter with a bunch of questions that didn't get answered, so he sent another letter a week later with all the answers, and he basically said, if you don't respond to me, I'm just going to proceed with this as planned. There's this really funny couple paragraphs in here at the end. I've tried my best for 3 weeks to get through to either Rands, who is the one of his assistants, or Miss Liddell to get an appointment with you. So you're just stuck with what I've decided to do. Rands credits you with the statement of, I'm riding the white horse on this matter and will therefore have to decide what direction I will ride. If this meets your approval, I will see it through. But next time you give me one of these honorary jobs, will you please pick one out where I just throw out my chest and have no work to do? I hope you appreciate the amount of complications I've taken off your hands on this one. And there's a very funny response from Rands, his assistant or chief of staff, approving everything that was in the letter. And he said, stop telling the governor I'm trying to louse up your appointments or I won't send you a Christmas card this year. These things are hard when you're doing them on Zoom because I'm just assuming you're all laughing. So thank you for laughing at my jokes. So Dreyfus was in charge of putting together this whole ceremony. They had bands, they had tanks, a lot of coordination between the government, the military, the National Guard, the state, the folks who came from France. The consul general was at the ceremony in New Jersey, and they had to fill the Trenton War Memorial Theater with tons of people to be there for it. Again, you can see how interested people were in it. This is Trenton on a weekday, and the sidewalks are packed with people. This year is State Street, back when it still had cobblestones. The scene looks very similar to the way it does now, but originally the armory was right down the street, which has since burned down. But they paraded it from the armory up to the War Memorial Theater, which is the big theater they do kind of government events at in Trenton. It was originally going to be outside in front of the State House, but they put it inside due to weather because this was in the middle of February. Why they decided to do this in the dead of winter, I have no idea. This is the crowd they attracted at the theater. If you look closely at this, I do notice that the first few rows all look very young, and I do wonder if they padded the crowd with local school children who had to be there. And here we have the Grand Chef de Guerre of the 48 on the left. The gentleman second from the left, I believe, is from the National Guard. That's Ludovic Chancel, who is the French Consul General, Governor Driscoll, and our boy Leonard Dreyfus. So inside the boxcar, I mentioned it came full of gifts. So what was inside the boxcar? Everything that came in the boxcar was put on display for the public. The French had arranged to fill the boxcar with gifts. They did not really tell anybody what to do with them. There were no instructions. It was kind of up to them. In some of Dreyfus's letters, he was trying to go through their options. They said, do we give them away? Do we sell them? Do we put them in a museum? Like, what the heck do we do with any of this stuff? They really had no idea what they were going to get. So what they did was they curated everything and they put a display in the State Museum and the Newark Museum. Between the two exhibits were the most well-attended exhibits that either museum had ever done to that point. They said 100,000 people had total between the two over about 2 or 3 months came to see both exhibits. Right here, that's the logo I mentioned earlier of the train itself and some of the medals that came with it. This is probably very niche, but if you've ever spent some time in Trenton, this is now Committee Room 4 at the State House, which is originally the State Museum. So all of the gifts were, for the most part, sentimental items. They were things that were donated by people that had either individual sentimentality, or they were heirlooms, or something that was important to an individual person that they thought would be a show of appreciation to the United States. And everything was tagged, so anybody who made a donation that they wanted to keep track of, they would put their name and where they're from on the tag so that it would stay with the gift. This is the only one I've ever seen myself, which was in Dreyfus's files. But it does make me wonder if he has a gift or was given a gift out of the boxcar, that he had the tag that went with it. I can't really tell what it says. But I'm sure one of his 50 grandkids has it at home. So, like I mentioned, a lot of sentimental gifts like dolls. This particular statue is a King Louis XIV. Like I mentioned, there's a few tangents here. I looked into the statue. There are a handful. It's a very famous large statue that was taken down during the French Revolution. But I reversed image searched the statue, and I believe I found it. There are apparently 4 of this particular statue made. There's one up for auction. It's going for $250,000. And I'm pretty sure it's this one. There's kind of no way to really know. A lot of china and kind of folk items, a lot of artwork. These were travel items from the French National Railroads. This was a sedan chair. This is something you put royalty in. They would put the 2 sticks. 2 guys would carry somebody sitting down in it. I would love to know where this went, because this is too big to hide. And I can't imagine anybody would throw it out. I would love to know where it went. This is a bugle that was donated by a sergeant who blew the armistice at the end of the war. I believe this to be one of many. I don't think it's the horn, but it is a very valuable. I had seen somebody wrote that the guy who donated this was his most cherished item, and he just wanted it sent to the United States as a show, like a grand show of his appreciation. This one is war relics. I tried to look up as much as I could in these photos. Straight ahead, you see a painting there. That's a ship called the Europa. It was a German ship that was awarded to France after the war as a war prize to make up for all the ships that the Germans sank of the French. And here's our gentleman too. After the exhibit, if you've ever been in the governor's office in the public part, this is right outside the governor's office, and they put some of the items on display there as well. It reminds me, I forgot to include the photos, but there are some medals here. They did some special medals just for the Merci Train that they sent to every state. And I guess they made some extras for the people who were directly involved, because they gave a set to Driscoll, and he has them in his collection, and I've seen them in person. It was very cool. And among the things we found that were also very cool, I translated this once. No, I totally forgot what it says, so my apologies. But it is a thank you note directly to Leonard Dreyfus, which is signed by the President of France. It's an actual wet signature. So now that's the gifts, what became of the boxcar. So one of the first things they did within a couple days was they sent it to a trailer company in Trenton, and they put it on road tires. So if you recall from the earlier photos, the 488 used to make these floats that they would bring around in parades and kind of promote their cause. I'm drawing some assumptions based on what I've found and what I've read. My guess is that they decided that they could make the actual boxcar into the boxcar that they would tour around with. The boxcar itself is 10,000 pounds. It's huge. So it's not easy to move around. You can do it. You'll notice it has to sit on 6 tires. It's very heavy and requires a pretty sizable truck to move it around, but it is doable. But compared to something that you can tow with a pickup truck that you would build yourself, was probably very difficult. But it did spend a couple years touring around, and there's some newspaper articles. You can see it went to some local events, and the 48 used it to promote their own causes, which is nice, because not only was it a memorial, and people who didn't get to see the boxcar arrive in the United States got to see it touring around the state. But it looks like originally they just took the railroad wheels off, slapped some tires on there. You will notice in later photos that the buffers are gone, and there's some other stuff missing inside the boxcar. It does lead me to believe that it was probably really heavy, and they were trying to shed some weight. So some of those things are missing, and we're working on replacing those. But this is where the story gets kind of sad and or interesting. The last trace of the boxcar shows up in 1958, and then it's just gone. So apparently they donated it to another organization in Long Island. I believe it was an American Legion post in Long Island. And then it evaporates from there. There was somebody who wrote a book in the 80s who tried to trace it down, and that's all they found out. It was donated in 1958, disappeared. So for me, I had found an interest in these like a really, really long time ago, and I had seen them before because a few of them are in railroad museums, and they struck me as odd, but I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to them. So when I sat down and read about the Merci Train, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize there's one of these in every state. Where's New Jersey's? Go on Google, look it up. It's gone. It's pretty much the end of the story. And that's it. That's all anybody can say about it. We had one, and it's gone. There were 49 of them. There are 43 of them left. And unfortunately, New Jersey's is one of those. And I always thought that was really regrettable because a lot of them are in railroad museums. They're important artifacts to a lot of states. A lot of them are very well taken care of and really well cared for. And New Jersey's is just gone, and it's a shame that happened. But that's not the end of the story. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So in October of 2024, on one of our Hudson River Rail excursions, I get an email with a subject line that says, New Jersey's Merci boxcar found. And I swear to you, I almost fell off my seat because it couldn't have been more matter of fact. I open up this email. It's from a gentleman from the State Museum who had been in touch with David Knutson, who I know is watching. Thank you, David. That somebody had found New Jersey's boxcar. They were very coy about it because the owner wanted to be subtle about it, but they knew it was New Jersey's boxcar. They knew they wanted it to go home. And I jumped right on it for a variety of reasons. Obviously, it's a very important railroad artifact. We're the largest railroad organization in the state. It would be great to have it back here. There's a variety of places it could go. By then, we knew that there are not a lot of large museums in New Jersey, so there's not a lot of places it can go. But knowing the story of the Merci Train, knowing that we had a place to restore it here, and having a really good idea for it, we said, we have to have this. It would be huge for the boxcar, it would be huge for our organization. We put together a proposal, and David called me one day with Nick from the State Museum and said that the boxcar is yours. The owner wants to give it to you. As it turns out, the boxcar was there this whole time. Since 1994, it was sitting in this warehouse. We have no idea how it got here. There's a missing chunk in its story that is still completely unaccounted for. It apparently made its way from Long Island to Tennessee. By the time the 90s came around, it was in this condition, still sitting on its original tires. And the farmer owned it. He wanted it off his property. He said, if anybody wants it, you can have it. Not too far away in Kansas City was the Liberty Memorial Museum, which was the organization that maintains the big World War I memorial that would later become the World War I Museum, the official, Congress-designated World War I museum. It is a fantastic museum, which I got to see when I went to Kansas City. If you go there, you will notice that museum has a ton of artifacts. The museum has more stuff than I've ever seen in a museum, and in a good way. And for years, they just collected and collected and collected anything related to World War I in advance of them becoming the big World War I museum. And, of course, this was one of them. They had plans to put it inside the building. There's like an indoor part of the memorial underneath that is has a huge room that they were going to turn into a museum. Well, it turned out they couldn't fit the boxcar into the building. So there was a company that moved it called Huddleston Machinery Moving. This is their warehouse. They said, can you guys hold on to it? We're going to figure out what to do with it. Apparently, the gentleman who had saved this boxcar, thank God, was particularly interested, and he wanted to restore it as a World War I boxcar. I believe he has long since passed. But they couldn't find anything to do with it, so they kept it in the museum for safekeeping. It was absolutely stunning to see in person. And this is the reason, one of the two reasons we know it's New Jersey's car. One is because it still has its tires arranged in the same way. There were a few boxcars that were put on tires, but this one was obviously New Jersey's once you know where to look. And then the French National Railroads was careful to keep all the original numbers with the boxcars. So once we knew it was ours, we got to meet the folks in the museum. They were awesome. They were so happy to send it home. It's important to note that they didn't have to do that. They really could have kept it if they wanted to find something to do with it. We didn't know who owned it, so we could only appeal to whoever it was that owned the boxcar, and to say that we think the best place for it is home in New Jersey. But that's what they wanted for it. They wanted to find a good home for it in New Jersey and send it where it belonged. But they were able to find it because there's a new, relatively young curator at the museum, and kind of the boxcar was off site, so nobody really looked at it. So in a kind of regular review of their collection, they went and looked at it and said, we have to find out what this is. And between him and David and the other researchers who really care about these boxcars pretty quickly were able to find out it was ours. So now it's coming home to New Jersey, and we have a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, the tires were gone, so this was the condition it was in. Like I mentioned, this company is a machinery moving company, so they can move this thing around no problem. So they just went and scooped it up with their forklift and dropped it here for us to work on. I got to drive this big truck out to Kansas City to start working on it. The goal here was they're going to put it on a truck for us. We need to, A, clean it, and B, take off everything that's not going to fly off on the highway. There's our buddy Lou. I don't know if he's watching, but that's Lou Capel, who's normally one of our servers on our Hickory Creek excursions, picking up a broom and cleaning up the 30 years of dirt. So we got it really clean. We took out everything that definitely can't be salvaged, and then saved everything that we could. I brought a leaf blower with me, and we shook out 30 years of dust. It was spectacular. And then in the process, we carefully took all of the either items that we can reuse or stuff that's going to be used for reference to make the new one, cataloged it all, wrapped it up, put it back in the boxcar. We put it in the truck, and then now it's currently sitting in the boxcar, so that we can eventually put this thing back together as soon as we can. This is the one item. I love this photo because it was tagged for the Liberty Memorial Museum, so we all knew who it belonged to. It's the only thing we didn't keep. We gave this back to the owners of the machinery moving company because it was their father's signature. The boxcar had sort of been handed down from one generation to the next because their father, who originally started the company and put the boxcar in their warehouse, had passed away. So we gave that back to them as a memento. That is one of their gigantic forklifts that can lift something like 20,000 pounds. And they can just scoop up the boxcar by its side and sit it up in the air. You see in the foreground, those are the new rims we found for it. And we put it back on the tires, cleaned it up, and all of a sudden it looks like a real boxcar. So this is, pretty normal business for them. So they plopped it on one of their trucks for us and wrapped it up. It had about 3 layers of wrapping. There's the blankets to keep it from ripping through the tarp. They shrink wrapped it, and then they wrapped another big tarp around it in addition to chaining it to the truck. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, we were really lucky to get this awesome donations from the Questers. The Questers supported us in a variety of ways, but one of them was the artwork for all the shields and the logos that were on the car had already been done before. The most recent boxcar restored are the Hawaii ones and the Utah boxcars. And some folks did some really great restoration work to recreate these logos exactly as they were. If you look at the photos of all of the boxcars all over the country, they're in all different types of conditions and quality of restoration. Almost all of them are wrong. I say that lovingly. But there's little historical details that are wrong. They're very well cared for by people, but, they're done by non-professional preservationists. But this great work was done to recreate all this stuff. So we have all the shields and everything that's going to decorate the car already, which we have out for display when we have people at the yard. And that's a replica of that brass plaque which has disappeared that says, boxcar used in the First World War, presented by the French National Railroads to the state of New Jersey, in gratitude for the help given to France by the American people. So right before our big event last year, here's the boxcar. Showed up on a truck right at the last minute. We just grabbed it with a forklift, chained it to a truck on the other end, and very, very gently brought it into our building. And now it's here. So I will wrap up with what happens with this boxcar next. Our plan sort of worked out exactly as planned, which is we wanted this boxcar for our collection because it's work that needed to be done. Obviously, that goes without saying. The boxcar needs to be restored. It needs to be here in New Jersey, and it's a worthwhile effort to put it back the way it's supposed to be. It's regrettable what happened. We can't change it. We can't change, how people felt about the boxcar. Obviously, the gifts themselves were very important, but it doesn't seem to me that everybody considered the boxcars themselves as important as the gifts that were inside them. They may have been merely the containers for them, but they were an important part of the gift, the boxcar itself. So we get to right that historical wrong. But also, we really wanted this boxcar for our collection because it's an important railroad artifact. And in growing our organization, we understand that having an artifact like this that represents something much bigger in the story of railroads in New Jersey is important to bring people in to see what our organization does and understand that we are a part of a much bigger story. And that has worked incredibly for us. So a few things we're working on right now. We have raised just about $40,000 for this boxcar of all individual donations and a few grants from organizations, which is incredible. We have so far spent that money on the stabilization work that we needed to do, the wheels, the tires, the shields that are going to decorate the car, actually getting the car back, which was donated, by the way, by Huddleston Machinery Moving. They moved that boxcar for us for free. So now we are moving forward as fast as we can with the actual restoration. It's something that needs to be done professionally. We're in the process of getting both county and state grants to carry out the restorations. We just applied for a county grant for the planning documents and all the construction work, then construction planning that needs to be done. And then the next step is to apply for state grants for the restoration itself. In the process, we have to be eligible for the State Register of Historic Places. We're hoping to hear back about that soon. That will actually we'll be eligible, and then we'll actually work on the process of being added to the State Register of Historic Places, which will be the first, hopefully, of many items in our collection that do make the State Register. But I don't want to speak for anybody in the state or county offices, but apparently everybody loves this project, which is great to hear. We can only assume what people would feel about a big project like this. We want people to see the importance of it, and we want people to appreciate it. You never know what's going to happen, but apparently the preservationists in government love this as much as we do, which is great to hear. So the restoration soldiers on, and we're hoping to have it done by 2028, all professionally restored right here in our shop. So I have a few last points I want to make, because I don't like to just talk about the what of these things. I like to talk about why. This boxcar is unique in that where the rest of our collection, like many trains, is about the great work of many, and all of the trains that we own in our collection are mostly anonymous. They were one of a whole bunch of the same type of locomotive, and with the exception of the Hickory Creek from the 20th Century Limited, they don't have a whole lot of superlatives. They are about like the day-to-day drudgery of the railroad that keeps society moving, right? But the boxcar is different. This boxcar has layers and layers of meaning that it has acquired over time since it was built, through 2 world wars, through coming here to the United States, and then everything that has happened since. So, obviously the first and most important is that it was built as a World War I artifact. It is a World War I artifact, and it was gifted to the United States because it was an artifact of World War I. They were meaningful to people in the United States for the same reason that the 48 organization exists. By 1949, World War I veterans were getting kind of old, but a lot of people still remembered this, and of course, they were still active in World War II, so there were new veterans coming through that would eventually join the American Legion in the 48 who remembered these boxcars. So it was sort of a memento. On top of that, it acts as a memorial to the people who served in it, and is representative that, the shared sacrifice and the shared trauma. They didn't save these boxcars because people loved them. They saved them because they hated them, and it was part of the experience, and it was part of the community people built as being veterans. On top of that, when they come to the United States, the French could have thanked us in any infinite number of ways, but they chose these particular boxcars, these particular troop transport boxcars, and they took a symbol of war, they turned it into a symbol of peace. They covered over, they included the original lettering, but they covered over these war boxcars with representations of all of the French people and the United States and World War I and World War II and the people of France, not just the soldiers, but the citizens of France, to represent the friendship and the peace between the two countries. And then on top of that, you have the Cold War. Drew Pearson was very clear that when we sent over the friendship train, it was intended to be propaganda. Is it propaganda? If I were more cynical, I would say yes, because this was the United States showing up, just like the moon landing. I'm glad we did it, but it was to show up the Russians. But what, to me, makes this not propaganda is the fact that both trains were contributed to by citizens. These were not really acts of government, despite the fact that, the French National Railroads did it, but they were filled with gifts from individual people. It was the same thing with the Friendship Train. It was the same thing with the Gratitude Train. These were true grassroots efforts, and try as the government may to use them as symbols of national pride or a way to force our way of life on Europe, they were still very indicative of the American people. So pile all of that on top of each other. This boxcar has a lot of stories to tell, and it's just a big block of wood. So I'm hoping that in restoring this, it becomes an important part of our collection, but it also gets to tour around, and we can get as many people in it, build an exhibit inside, and tell people all these stories all at once. It may take an hour to explain, but I think these stories are really important. I think there's some obvious modern-day parallels, and there's a lot to be learned from it, and all in this little boxcar. So I'll leave it there. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you would like to contribute to this project, you can do so at urhs.org/Merci Train. I thank you all for listening, and hope to see you around Booten Yard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Richard, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. That was
you are muted.
You can't hear me? Hold on. Can you hear me now? You're muted.
This is so embarrassing. No, there we go.
No.
Was there any questions I missed in the...
Let's see.
Thank you all for the comments. I really appreciate that.
What color were these boxcars originally? That was a question.
They were originally gray. Funny enough, I can double back to, 500 slides ago. I believe they were gray in service, and they kept the same color when they were restored. They're like all over the place now. There's a couple that are painted red. I can't quite figure out why anybody would have done that, other than they thought they looked good. But they were all flat gray with the shields on top. I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. So the best examples to look at here are the two in the middle. The one on the right is the one in Texas, which is the one that is maintained by David Knudsen, who I know is here in the presentation. David also points out in his comment is that MerciTrain.org has information on all of these. I don't want to bore everybody with many, many thank yous, but I owe a great many people a lot of thanks for imparting all of this knowledge on me, and the people who take care of MerciTrain.org are chiefly among them, including David. But yeah, so that one there is a really good example. The one on the left is the one in Baltimore. Here's my cursor. This is the only one that is unrestored. It's in a bit of rough shape because it's kind of out in where the public can touch it, and it's kind of worn out at right at chest level where people touch it. But it is totally original, and all the shields and everything are exactly as they arrived because it has been indoors in that museum pretty much since it arrived in the U.S. And that one on the bottom right is a really good example too. Ours will look pretty much identical to that. And we're lucky because we will be the last one restored, pretty much. I don't think there are any that are in really bad shape that need a whole ton of work. So we really benefit from the research and the work that has been done by a whole bunch of people in advance of ours, so we can, avoid all the mistakes. Bob Ross, happy accidents that were made in the restoration of the other cars. I should point out as well that I cannot give David Knudsen enough praise, But one thing he did in the process of doing the work to the Texas car is he made a manual for how to restore these boxcars so that no one can ever mess up anything ever again. If you need to know exactly what to do with it, it is written down, and you just follow that. You can't go wrong. So that's exactly what we're going to do. David, I don't know if I mentioned this, but like in the process of applying for the grant, we included that document so they can say it's as part of the conditions assessment. It's like we know what has to get done because it's all written right here.
Perfect. Here's a question from Lloyd. Any idea? I'm guessing he's referring to the truck wheels. Why they're not set equal distant front to back on the boxcar?
That's a very good question. The front wheels steer, so I assume it needed to be forward enough that you could pull it with the trailer and it would steer back and forth. It would look a lot better if they were both in the middle, though, wouldn't it? It would blend in a lot more with the original wheels. There is a detail I left out, is that we are looking for original railroad wheels. We want to be able to have it tore around on its tires because it spent the vast majority of its time in the United States and New Jersey on the road tires. But if we can find original wheels, which we may have, I hope, we'll eventually put it on rail wheels. I love the idea of putting the train wheels back on it and then mounting it on a flat car the way they were delivered here. How long will it take me to get ahead to that photo? Yes, it would be so much fun to plop one on a freight car and present it in a different way than all the rest of them around the country. And somebody asked where the New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New England States boxcars. I know the New York boxcar is near Utica. That one is in kind of a sad state. It is thankfully undercover, but it belonged to a 48 organization, which has since closed, so the property is abandoned. I've been to see it. It's beautiful and original, but it needs some help. I recall it was like 2 or 3 years ago. I believe the county was going to take over responsibility for it, but nothing has happened yet. I haven't seen anything. But I do have my eye on it because it would be, not that we need another train baby, but, train baby to take care of. It'd be cool to see it in or near New York City again, since that's where it has so much of its history. But my guess is they wanted to put it somewhere geographically centered, and where it is near Utica is pretty much like dead center. The Pennsylvania one is, I believe, at a National Guard facility on the side of the road, in kind of like dead center in the state, right off of Route 80. Somebody just mentioned the Delaware one's in Seaford. The Connecticut one is one of the ones that's gone, confirmed gone. As for the rest of the New England ones, I'm not sure, but a great plug for MerciTrain.org. That info is all there. It's a lot to keep track of. This whole presentation was just about the New Jersey car, so there's this for every other state.
A lot of tiny boxcars.
Yeah, and every one of them has a whole hour-long presentation associated with it. One of the most interesting ones is funny enough, I believe it's North Dakota. North Dakota kept everything that was in the boxcar. So they have the boxcar and all of its contents, and they have a really nice website for everything that was in it, and can kind of keep track of like every little thing, and especially some of the stuff that was purposely given away, like the wedding dresses and everything. I believe they have that too.
So now we all have a reason to visit North Dakota.
Yeah.
All right, that looks like the end of the questions. But we had about 80 people tune in, so it was a well-attended presentation. So thank you again, Kevin, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We do have this presentation recorded. We'll get it up on the website shortly. Our next presentation will be on the second Thursday in May on the Rockaway Loop. We hope to see you there. And with that, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.